Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. Densify's presentation on AWS Savings Plans versus Reserved Instances. I am joined today by Faisal Mohammed, who's my Senior Cloud Architect, and Tom Uitung, who's Densify's Chief Architect and resident expert in all things savings plans and reserved instances. Welcome, guys.
Hi, guys.
Hello. So today, getting into some very interesting topics around reserved instances, savings plans. There's still some confusion out there in the market around that. So we're looking forward to diving into that. Just before we get started, I would ask anyone if you have questions during the webinar. Everyone is on mute, but if you do have questions, please post them through the questions window in your GoToWebinar interface, and we will save time at the end to address them. And if you're asking about a recording, we will certainly make that available to everyone by early next week via email. So let's get started and talk about what we are going to talk about here today. So Faisal's going to run through some content here around reserved instances. What are they and the benefits and drawbacks of using them? We see a lot of customers moving to savings plans these days, but still have a fair investment in reserved instances. They want to know about them still. And savings plans, what are they and the benefits and drawbacks of them? The so-called no-brainer we see, and we'll speak to this, is that 99% of the time it looks like, it just go invest in savings plans, but not so fast. There are some considerations here where RIs still tend to make sense in augmenting your savings plans with some of those things and getting better mileage out of your convertibles in particular. And this will be more of a discussion today, a bit of a roundtable, since we have two experts that aren't always available at the same time to provide our guidance around this interesting topic. So Faisal, I'm going to turn it over to you and get started on the good old reserved instances.
Thank you so much, Andy. So everyone, thank you so much for joining this. So let's start talking about reserved instances and where they come from and what they're about. So reserved instances give you discounted pricing compared to on-demand, and in exchange for that, you make a commitment for utilization level for a year, 1 year, or 3-year term. Now, the history of EC2 instances, when they first came out, they were all on-demand. So essentially, you're paying per hour. AWS came out with this concept of reserved instances, where you would say, okay, I am going to reserve these instance types for my usage, and in exchange for that commitment that I'm making to you for a 1 or 3-year term, I'm going to receive a coupon or a discount. And that's what this reserved instances are. Now, there are certain attributes that define reserved instances. For example, you got to pick an instance type. Maybe it's a T3 large, an M5 extra large. You got to pick a region. You want to run it the US East or West. Platform, whether it's going to be in a Windows system, a Red Hat Enterprise Linux system, SUSE, or a Windows SQL Server, etc. You also got to choose the kind of scope, whether you're running AZ or regional type, and tenancy, whether they're running on shared hardware or dedicated hardware. And they come in two different offering classes, what AWS calls them. They're standard and they're convertible. So here's a few examples that I will talk about. You'll see there. So when you pick an instance, when you actually make a reservation, you say, give me a 1-year, no upfront standard T3 medium Linux regional scope in US East 1 with shared tenancy. And here's the pricing for that. That's about, that's the pricing you see there. And it's about 37% discount from the actual on-demand price. And on the other side, if you were to buy, say, a convertible RI, then you could say, give me a 3-year. I'm going to make an all upfront payment rather than no upfront payment. And give me a convertible M5 extra large, Windows, zonal scope in the US East 1A, shared tenancy. And that gives me a 28% discount. Now, what's this thing about standard versus convertible RIs and the zonal and regional RIs? Let's talk a little bit about them. So at the very beginning, they were just standard RIs. So in the standard RIs, you actually specify the exact specifications, as I said, the instance type, the scope, the platform. And if you have an instance that's running that matches the specific attributes, then the discount applies to you. Now, there were some challenges with that because, what if I bought RIs and I bought the wrong types? Maybe I bought a C5 extra large, but my workloads can be optimized to an M5 large instead. Can I change them? Well, there are certain rules that allows you to convert them or not convert them. So we'll talk about them. In this case, that's what convertible RIs came about. convertible RIs allowed you to actually switch instance families, switch the tendency, switch the OS to as well. And so in this case, you can say, yep, okay, I was running some C5 extra large, but now I want to run them on M5 large. I can convert them. So the table below, we'll talk about some of these features and limitations and the challenges, and I'll offer some commentaries as we go through them. With RIs, you can get up to 70% to 72% discount compared to on-demand. That's your standard RIs. And with convertible RIs, the maximum discount you can get up to is 66%. Now, the challenge with that is, again, RIs, you pay for them. And the idea is that you pay for them and you should be using them. If you don't use them, you're still paying for them. And those RIs, if they're underutilized, they are actually costing you money. So in this case, it's good to buy RIs for workloads that are constantly running 24/7, so you get a maximum discount available. The other thing you have to think about RIs as well is that what if you wanted to reserve capacity? So AWS has this concept called zonal RIs, and that allows you to reserve capacity. So I could say, hey, listen, I'm going to be running these workloads in US East 1A, and I want to reserve capacity for them. That's great. However, the other side of the coin is, what if I didn't want to restrict myself to some specific availability zone? What if I wanted to say I want to run a US East 1 region, and it could be in US East 1A or B or C availability zone? I don't care. I want that kind of region, that AZ flexibility. What can we do with that? Well, that's where standard RIs come in with the regional RIs with flexibility, with the regional flexibility there. What if I bought instances and I bought a M5 extra large, but I want to run now M5 large or M5 medium, right? Can I do that? This instance size flexibility. That's where AWS came about, and they started evolving their technology, and they said, okay, well, we're going to talk about regional RIs. As long as they're regional RIs and they're Linux operating systems, I'm going to allow you to do some instance size flexibility. They have these normalization factors that they state. So as an example, if I have a M5 for M5 large, that's actually 2 M5 mediums or 4 M5 small. They have these normalization factors that allows me to actually change the instance sizes within the actual instance family, as long as it is a Linux operating system running on shared tenancy and it's a regional RI. Now, the flip side with the dilemma with this is, how do I maximize my RIs that I have already purchased for? For example, if I have already purchased RIs and I've purchased they're already oversized, or if they're the wrong family, so rather than the M5, maybe I could run it on a T3 family instead. What can we do about this? Well, that's where AWS started thinking about, okay, how can we help customers? And they came up with this concept of convertible RIs, where you can now switch families. One of the things that you can do with standard RIs and not convertible RIs is you can actually go about and sell them in the AWS marketplace. So yeah, I bought a lot of RIs, I don't really use them, and they're going underutilized. What should I do? Well, I can go ahead and sell them in the marketplace. That's good. But there's always a but there. What value am I getting back? Am I going to get back the exact value that I paid for it? No, it's going to be governed and dictated by the actual market prices. So what we see from customers who've actually oversubscribed or bought a lot of standard RIs is that when they're actually selling to the marketplace, they're not necessarily getting back the value that they were expecting, but often much less than what they had invested in. So for them, oh yeah, a lot less, definitely. And it doesn't make sense for them. So in this case, they're stuck with those RIs until they actually expire or decide some way to optimize their workloads, which we'll talk about them. Lastly, of course, convertible RIs came about. That's the latest evolution of the RIs, and they offered far more flexibility to overcome some of these constraints that we talked about. You have these instance size flexibility, but not family size flexibility. What if you wanted to switch operating systems, go from Windows to Linux, or change tenancy? Convertible RIs give you all that benefit. Okay, yeah, that's great, excellent. So now I can say, okay, I bought a wrong RI. I was stuck with it previously with a C5 extra large, but now I can go to T3A because I have a convertible RI. But the dilemma with that is that they come with a set of complex rules. So there are rules that say, okay, well, how can I exchange them? You can only exchange them for equal or higher value of RIs. They have to be in the same region. And if you have multiple convertible RIs that you're trying to, exchange for a single convertible RI, then the expiration date is always the one that's the furthest out. There are all these rules that make it very, very difficult to figure out, okay, what should I do? How do I optimize them? And so it's not an automated process. It's actually a complex, cumbersome process. The other dilemma with that is, if you end up buying a target convertible RI that is of higher value than the one that you have today, then you're going to have something what's known as true-up cost. So you have to pay the actual difference between what you invested in and what you want. And how do you go about maximizing or so minimizing that true-up cost and getting the maximum value out of RI? These are all the challenges that we see in the industry as we speak with customers. So what happened? Well, AWS understood, they listened to their customers. They had a lot of feedback from the field. And right before reInvent 2019, they just announced savings plans. I remember this day just like yesterday. As soon as we saw that, we all got together in a room. We're like, okay, this thing is new. This is fresh. Everyone was just talking about this at AWS reInvent. And what exactly is it? And how is it different? Well, if you recall, in the reserved instance, you got a discounted pricing compared to on-demand in exchange for a utilization commitment. Well, savings plan is a little bit different. It's saying, I'm going to give you a discount compared to your on-demand pricing, but in exchange, I want you to commit to $1 spend per hour over a 1 or 3 year term. So an example will be saying, okay, I'm going to go ahead and purchase a 1 year, no upfront, EC2 savings plan, and it's going to be in the US East 1 region at T3 instance type family. And I'm willing to spend I'm committing to spend 50 cents per hour for over 1 year. In exchange for that, I want some discounts. Or alternatively, you can say I want a 3 year all up front. But in this case, I'm going to say I want a compute savings plan, and I'm committing to spending $10 per hour. So as you can see, there's again 2 different flavors, EC2 savings plan and compute savings plan. One actually mentioned the actual instance type, the other one did not. And how do they compare to reserved instances? So the best way to look at them is this particular table that we're talking about here, right? What we see, and the analogy is very easy to see, you can compare EC2 savings plans to standard RIs. So in this case of standard RIs, you have to specify the actual AZ, or if it's a AZ scope, zonal scope RI, you have to specify an instance type. You have to get capacity reservations. You can get that too as well. And compared to that, in the EC2 savings plan, you also specify the size. But in this case, you can also get the OS and tenancy as well, as you see that there. You get discount up to 72% there. So they almost line up there, as you can see there. On the other side of the coin, you have convertible RIs. And convertible RIs, they give you the flexibility. They give you the flexibility to go about changing the sizes, changing the family, so you can go from M5 to C5, the operating system, or tenancy, which is the benefit of them. But in exchange for that extended flexibility, you get a lower discount of 66%. And comparing that, the analogy of that in the savings plan is the compute savings plan. In the compute savings plan, also you get the size, the family, the operating system, and tenancy flexibility. But additionally, what they have now introduced, this is what makes them so much more effective, they've also introduced regional flexibility and service flexibility. Meaning, I could say, I want a compute savings plan, and I want a compute savings plan in US East 1 region. But if I have a workload running in Europe or Australia, that compute savings plan would actually get automatically applied there too as well. And the service flexibilities, which is also really neat, is that it does not just apply to EC2 only, but it can also apply to any compute workload that you're running in AWS. It could be EKS, Fargate, or Lambda. So that's what makes them much, much more powerful and more enticing for customers that we see there. So when we put those 2 things together, the next thing happens is, okay, well, how do I, what's the best, what's better, what's worse, or how do I decide what's right for me? And we'll talk about that in our discussion. But if I were to list it down for you, here's how I look at them. Here's some advantages savings plans have over reserved instances. In the case of savings plans, or let's talk about RIs, if you have convertible RIs, you have to manage those exchanges, as I mentioned them. Well, in the case of savings plans, the discounts are automatically applied at the highest amount. So there's no management overhead in that case. That's what makes them a little bit more exciting. Savings plan can also be shared across all your accounts, just like all your linked accounts, just like your reserved instances as well. And there's some strategies that they recommend. For example, purchasing these shared savings plans at the if you're an enterprise at the organization level or an account, so that they get shared across all your other linked accounts and you get the maximum benefit out of them. But they also offer other things that reserved instances don't, as I mentioned. Regional flexibility. So you could buy compute SPs, and these SPs are not constrained to a single region, but across all your regions. So if you're an enterprise and you have a multinational corporation you're running across different regions, buying these compute savings plans makes most sense for you, because if you're not using them in US East region, you could go ahead and use them in US West or Europe or Asia Pacific, etc. And also the service flexibility, same thing again. Again, compute SPs, they allow you to share that discount across all your compute services, EC2, EKS, Fargate, Lambda. So with RIs, where you're worried about if they were underutilized, with compute SPs, you know that if you buy the right amount, they're gonna get applied across all your workloads. So there's less management, all your compute workloads, and there's less management associated with that. On the other hand,
I'm gonna get Tom. Tom, anything
sure.
to add to that?
Yeah. Just the one thing about that as Faisal said, the discounts are applied automatically, but it's actually even better than that. In that when they apply those discounts for these savings plans, they get applied to the thing with the highest discount first. So say you had some Linux EC2 instances, and the discount on those things are 72%. It will get applied to those ones first, versus let's say you have some other usage such as SQL Server. SQL Server, they're notoriously little discounts. Sometimes they're 5-10% discount. So by applying the discount to the thing with the highest discount first by priority, that's where you do actually maximize the savings, and it will do that hour on hour. So if you imagine you had convertible RIs to do this, if you wanted to actually try to do that, you'd have to go and change your RIs and make them match the thing that had the highest discount, all the time to go and find it. Savings plan does that for you automatically. Now, the one caveat to that Faisal did mention was that, when they go and prioritize and apply these discounts, what it does is that, when you purchase these savings plans, you need to purchase it in a specific account. And then it will apply to the thing with the highest discount of usage in that same account first before it gets shared across other accounts. So the note there then is that if you're really trying to maximize your savings, then what you want to do is buy it in an account that virtually uses nothing, has no compute usage. Then that way it will go and find the highest discount across all your linked accounts. But if you purchase it in an account that already has a lot of usage, and let's say it has SQL Server in there, then it will get applied to those things before it might find some Linux in other accounts. So that's the key thing that Faisal was mentioning, where buy an account that is maybe the payer account or some dummy account where you don't run EC2 or Fargate or any of this usage, then it will get applied to the highest discount. So that will maximize your savings.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom, there. Absolutely. That's a great tip there, Tom, and a very, very good point to note there, how to maximize that benefit for the savings plan. Now, when you talk about reserved instances, now they do also have certain things that savings plans do not. For example, as I mentioned, standard RIs can actually be sold in the marketplace. Often, again, you get less value for it, but at least it gives you the ability to sell them if you have oversubscribed to RIs. With savings plans, there's currently no mechanism to sell them in any marketplace. Alternatively, RIs can also offer, you could be purchasing RIs for RDS, Redshift, or ElastiCache. So if you have services that are actually using them, then yes, buying an RI makes sense for you, because again, savings plans is towards the compute EC2 or Fargate or Lambda, but nothing for Redshift or RDS, etc. Now also with reserved instances, you can make capacity reservations, as we talked about zonal RIs. So that's another benefit of RIs. However, there's a caveat to that with savings plans. With savings plans, even though you cannot buy reserve capacity, what they have done is that you can go ahead and buy on-demand capacity reservations. And as long as you have savings plans that match them, then they will automatically get applied for you. So you could be able to get reservations that way. So that's how AWS recommends you to go about doing them. And the last thing that we've seen, even though again virtually the discounts are more or less the same between savings plans and RIs, in some cases for certain platforms, for example, SUSE EC2 instances, we saw that they actually offer way more discount for RIs versus savings plans. So again, that's something to keep a note of. If you're running a lot of SUSE workloads, then in this case, again, you may be leaning a little bit more towards RIs over savings plans. Tom, any other commentary that you want to add? Anything I may have missed?
Right. No, and related to that SUSE thing, let's say if you're running SUSE in combination with Windows, RHEL, and all that other stuff, you can buy RIs specifically for the SUSE one, and then still buy savings plans for the other stuff, right? Because again, back to how Amazon applies these things, they'll apply RIs first before the savings plan. So, this allows you to kind of get the best of both worlds, rather than just buying savings plan, for everything only.
Correct, absolutely. So, I mean, what we are seeing overall, like in the industry, when we speak to our customers, when we're going out to these trade shows, more or less, it seems like it's a no-brainer to go towards compute savings plans because of all the benefits that they offer. But not so fast. There's always caveats. There's always dilemmas. And Andy, I think I'll pass it back to you to lead the discussion here.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a few questions specific of Tom here, and then you chime in as well, Faisal. But
Sure.
That I think there's I don't know if it's confusion so much, but there certainly is still a lot of uncertainty out there around commitment levels, et cetera. So Tom, just a few things, and I think you might have just mentioned this a little bit here just moments ago around how you purchase against specific accounts, but talk a little bit about centralized purchasing versus departmental-based decision making. How does that affect how you would purchase?
So some of we have in our customers that we have, there's different purchasing models and budgeting models that they have in the company, right? So in some companies, what they have is, let's say they have a centralized FinOps group that goes and looks at the cloud, and they have mandate to go and buy, savings plan or RIs or whatever things across all the usage across their whole enterprise. So that's one sort of extreme of this case. The other one is that there is no such group, and each department is kind of on their own, so they're managing their own RIs and savings plan, and they're buying it, for their own usage. That's kind of the other extreme. And often there's some in-between case too, where maybe there is a centralized group, but then there's some bigger groups within the company that will also want to buy for themselves, and they need to kind of coordinate those things. But that's one of the key things that when we're saying you're going to buy savings plan or RIs for that matter as well, you need to know, who, what are you buying it for, and then if you're buying it, if there's many groups within that company that are buying it, then it'd be nice that they kind of talk to each other. Somehow they coordinate their actions such that one overbuys, then hopefully someone else can potentially benefit from it as well. Right, so that's one key factor, and then that sort of applies to when you're kind of buy some, then am I buying for everybody or just for my own group? And we've kind of said we've seen both cases.
Gotcha. Next one. So in terms of making sure that the instances and the autoscale groups that you have are actually optimized or right-sized, how does that affect your purchasing of savings plans?
Right. Okay. So where that comes into play is that so now let's say imagine I have greenfield. I'm running a whole bunch of EC2 instances. I have auto scaling groups running in my environment, and now I'm all prepared to buy some savings plan or RIs for that matter, or in this case, it's a stock savings plan. I want to buy some savings plans for that. And if you go to the Amazon Cost Explorer and Enter Console, they will go and provide a recommendation to say, here's how much savings plan to purchase given the certain historical usage that you can see for the last 30 days, 60 days. You can specify that. Now, what that doesn't quite capture though is that, imagine, your instances that you're running or your auto scaling groups aren't sized properly. They're not optimized. They're not running the right instances. Maybe their, minimum scaling size is too aggressive, such that they're very high, and it's actually running more, there's spare capacity within all your infrastructure for your EC2. So if you were to buy savings plans for that amount of operation, what you're going to find then is you'll potentially overbuy because, if you are to right-size those things, you would reduce the cost of those EC2 instances. And then your commitment level, if you actually need to purchase, is actually less. So it's often good to either right-size or at least do an analysis where you say, okay, if I right-size, maybe I'll be able to reduce my spend by about 30%, and then maybe accordingly, you'll probably also want to have to reduce your, savings plan purchase by that equal amount, that 30%, just to kind of account for that thing. Otherwise, if you go and buy for what you're currently using right now, there's almost no incentive to right-size because it's already paid for it.
Right. We saw this recently with one customer who'd committed hundreds of dollars per hour. And we looked at an analysis of their environment, of their savings plan, and probably 35 to 40% optimization opportunity underneath that. Luckily, their environment is growing, but they bought before they analyzed, so to speak, or at least committed to their savings plan, and that can be a very costly venture, obviously, if you're doing it based on what you're doing today.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then sort of a similar thing here is that if you have existing, underutilized convertible RIs, right? What you can do, or what you should consider, is that if they're not being fully utilized, can you convert these ones? And you will get better coverage, higher utilization, reduced cost, and then accordingly, the commit level for your savings plans will need to be reduced as well. So that's another important consideration.
I might ask Faisal about this one here in terms of some of the recommendations you might see from some of the free tools that are out there, or some of the high-level bill analysis tools. Just your take on that quickly. I know I'm pushing against the top of the hour, but it's a very interesting discussion. So Faisal, what's your thoughts on this?
Yes, I mean, this is something that I see also. People ask, hey, I have all these free tools out there, but the challenge with them is, are they taking into account, first of all, your inventory, your stock today, your RIs that you've purchased, are they fully utilized? Are your instances optimized? Most often they're not. They're just simply telling you, okay, well, you purchased this much workload, we recommend you buy these other savings plans. And sometimes these savings plans are on top of your existing convertible RIs, which is what Tom mentioned previously. So what if you could optimize your workload? What if you could optimize your convertible RIs, and that way you don't buy as much savings plans as you need to? Well, that's where these free tools miss the point. They miss that gap there, essentially.
Yeah. And then I think, and I just chime in here, and Tom, I think, well, we would all agree that you can't do any of this stuff in a vacuum, whether it's departmental versus centralized, versus one group looking at RIs, another group looking at savings plans. It all has to be managed together, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And we have two good examples here, and we are pushing the time limits, but I think this is very interesting, and I think these are really good examples here. So Tom, just talk to me what we're looking at here in terms of, just let me set the stage. This is an analysis, high level, of a specific billing environment. We're looking at the bottom in red, our RI effective cost. In yellow, we are looking at the savings plan effective costs, the on-demand, I guess, cost on top of that in gray, and then the black line that's going up slowly but surely would have been what they would have paid without any of these long-term purchase vehicles. So what does this chart tell us?
Yeah, so again, so what this kind of saying is that, so originally they had, if you look at the start, the left-hand most side of this chart, they had some savings plan, some RIs, and then paying quite a bit of on-demand costs. And this was kind of legacy RIs that they already had. They're not going to replace them, and as they expire, the plan is to replace them with savings plans. But what they obviously observed here is that their growth is going up, and they could go and actually start committing more to savings plan. And you can see those steps up on the yellow. So those are increase in savings plans commitment, and then accordingly you're seeing the cost go down, such that the gray area, the on-demand costs, are going down. And then as it just continues to grow and grow, they just are popping up more and more as time goes by. So that's kind of what's happening. So for this one, I guess, given that they're pretty confident that their usage is going up, then they're pretty confident they can go and commit to these things in the long term, because they'll save quite a bit of money as they do this.
And they've done a good job when you look at it from a long-term perspective, because if they stayed with on-demand, obviously their costs would have increased. So they kind of moved with the curve and covered themselves off more and more as their environment's grown with these savings plans, less than the on-demand.
Yeah.
What is this one telling us?
Yeah, so this one has more steady usage. So if you look at the EC2 usage, it's not climbing as much. It's climbing slightly, but not as dramatic as the one that we saw previously, right? What you do see a bit, though, if you kind of look at the red area where there's that circle, there's a little increase in it where the coverage of the RIs actually went up. And, that actually was as a result of doing RI exchanges. So they had convertible RIs, they weren't all fully utilized. We exchanged them, and then we actually bumped up that coverage of those things. And then based upon that knowledge, when we went and said, let's go and buy some savings plan to top this thing up with, we didn't buy the full amount that was sort of prescribed. we accounted for this increase in the RI utilization. And that way, as you can see, the yellow line just kind of nicely sort of covers what's there, and we didn't overbuy. Had we bought a larger amount, then we would have potentially been overbuying, and then because when the RI utilization went up, then that would have caused the on-demand to go down, so therefore the coverage and the requirements for savings plan would have gone down as well. And then over time here, when you see there's little step down later on with the red stuff, that's just RIs expiring, and then they're just being replaced by savings plans. Right. And that goes on.
And these are two examples of customers we have helped figure out what is that right combination of on-demand and reserved instances and savings plans to ensure that they are not going to overcommit on the wrong vehicle for a long-term period. So let's wrap up with a couple last slides here, and just see. I'll check the questions here in just a moment. Maybe Faisal, you can have a look at that as well as I'm presenting this out. But optimizing purchases with Densify. Obviously, we've been discussing around reserved instances, savings plans optimization for those customers that still have savings plans, particularly the convertible ones. We can help them constantly and continuously leverage the right RI portfolio by looking at what they have and making recommendations on how to convert those things intelligently, fitting the optimized, right-sized infrastructure for those instances, and at the same time minimize those true-up costs, which can be significant. So the prescriptive, detailed list of exactly what should be exchanged, and manage out of those existing RIs where optimal, and then help with the savings plan commitment. The selection is to, from accounts, EC2 versus compute, the evaluation and consideration on the different terms, payment options, and then what is that optimal level? How much should it be on an hourly basis? So helping customers with that is obviously, those two things today are very key components for many of our customers. It's just figuring out, what am I committing to long term? We'll provide the full monitoring of the RI utilization and coverage to maximize the efficiency. The RI aware recommendations, which is to ensure that if you're already covered by something like a standard RI, is not making a recommendation to say, well, you should switch out of it. Well, you're already covered by that, so you're gonna have to stay with that, or until such time as you can either get rid of it or convert to something, assuming it's a convertible RI.
All right, and so I just want to jump in there. That this kind of highlights that had you bought savings plan instead of that, then your hands aren't tied. You can go and right size things all you want to, make things fully optimal and reduce your costs. But because you bought standard RIs, then you're kind of locked into that instance type and so on. There's no sense
in switching out, because you're just going to decrease the utilization of what you've already paid for, right? The instance optimization, understanding what your potential savings are before oversubscribing. So that's all around making sure you're not committing to the wrong level. So full recommendations of everything that you're using today on the instances, the RDS and auto scale group potential optimization. Fully and transparent convertible RI exchange process. I just showed an example of that one just a moment ago. And then savings plan recommendation, to make sure you're aware of your existing RIs and converting. And finally, what's really important is that this is not an exact science. There's so many different combinations and permutations that, as part of the Densify managed service, is that we will provide assistance for you, optimization, financial visibility, all the dashboards you need, and the specific recommendations, but also, the kind of help that you're seeing from the experts we have on the call here today, from Faisal, Tom, and the rest of our Cloud Advisor team. I will take questions in just a moment. I will end this last slide with, in terms of, if you want to see what your potential is today, what your instance optimization is in the public cloud, or potentially in your containers environment or your on-prem VMware, go to Densify.com, click on the Start Trial button, fill this form out. We'll contact you, approve the request, and we'll get you started with your own dedicated instance. You log in, you put in your credentials for your public cloud or your private cloud or your containers, what have you. We'll initiate the data collection, and typically within 24 to 48 hours, we'll have some answers for you in terms of what does your potential look like. So we look forward to working with you on those things. If you're interested in doing it, it's very pain-free, and most customers are up and running within the day in order to see what their potential looks like. Faisal, any specific questions you've seen out there?
One question that I'm seeing here, Andy, again, customers always want to know, and this is a really good question. So what should I purchase? Should I buy SPs? Should I buy RIs? Or should I buy both? Tom, your thoughts on that?
I find, like, for most of our customers that we deal with, I find that, again, these tend to be the larger customers, big enterprises with lots and lots of usage. Compute savings plan almost seems to be the way to go. It's almost like that's what I default when I start with, and then tell me why you want to buy something else, whether you want to do EC2 savings plan or RIs or whatever other options. I often will start with compute savings plans because they're just simplest, easiest, and while you don't get as much savings because there's a bit of premium that over EC2 savings plans, you just have so much more flexibility, right? And you're able to commit for much longer because if I was to buy EC2, potentially I'd be fixed to, let's say, an M5 family of instances. And if I want to commit for 3 years, well, do I really think I'm going to be running M5s 3 years from now? Maybe they'll be M6s, M7s, who knows what's going to be out there, at that point in time.
Correct.
M6 or M7, yeah, we're getting it there, but it could happen any day, right? They announce new services every day. So
absolutely.
One other question here, and it's related to reserved instances, saying that I've got the convertibles, and you guys keep talking about minimizing true-up costs. And how do you help me with that? So Tom, maybe that's a good question for you. Sure, and I think we do see sometimes with some of the concierge services that the true-up costs can be substantial. So how do we help with that, and can we even automate it?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do, and we do our exchanges, and this is all happening automatically because we have algorithms to sort this all out, is that when we exchange, what we find is we look at what's the underused RIs, and we look at what you kind of need. So we look at what's unused and what you need. And then when we try to go from one to the other, what we actually do is we actually go through T3 nano RIs as part of doing that exchange process as an intermediate step. And by using T3 nano RIs, what we're doing is, T3 nano RIs are very, very cheap. They're kind of the smallest unit of RIs that you can exchange to. And the way I kind of look at this is that, if I had to exchange, $100 bills, and I'm trying to get, $50 bills or $200 bills, converting them to pennies first allows me to sort of minimize, all those little rounding errors. And then as I apply to the new stuff, again, my rounding error will really be just T3 nanos. So in doing that, your true-up costs can be minimized.
Right. And then we can also automate that, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, through the APIs available from AWS, we can help customers do that because there is a time basis associated with actually converting those things, because every day that you wait, coverage changes, new services available. So I think there's a time basis in that you have to be able to automate these decisions as well. We are well over the time, but that's okay. I really appreciate the fact I had two experts on with me here today. So Tom and Faisal, thank you very much. For the folks on the line, yes, we will send out a recording of this session.